Um, hello, out there to Facebook world. This is us exchanging our normal nonsense at the beginning of a live. This is Ruth from Autistic Parents UK. We have also got Shona Murphy with us today as like a special guest appearance. And obviously Kieran Rose here. And today we wanted to be talking about parenting through burnout. Given the messages that we've been having coming in, this seems to be a topic that is really close to a lot of people's heart, or close to their mind, or a lot of people saying, yeah, I should write this stuff down because then when I'm in burnout, I'm not going to be able to access any of this information. So write notes, take notes. Everybody that's out there today, take notes. So I'm going to start you off with like the crux of the matter, Kieran. We're going to start off with a really meaty question.
You always start with the easy ones, don't you?
I like to start you off easy. No, I like to basically drop you off a cliff and then chat on the way down. So how do you do it? If you as a parent are actually in burnout, how do you parent your children and still be kind and compassionate and try and meet their needs?
As well as you can.
Mm.
I think if I had a magic wand and could wave it and could answer that for everybody out there, then I would. But there is no simple answer to that, I'm afraid. It's hard. Parenting is hard enough at the best of times, but when you're going through burnout, whether you're neurodivergent or autistic, it becomes 50 times, 100 times, 1,000 times harder when you're dealing with. It's not just parenting, is it? It's all the stuff that comes alongside that as well, and dealing with people outside the family and all of the problems that do seem kind of, there's your lady, and all those issues that usually kind of irritate you all of a sudden become massive problems.
Yeah.
And I think the best advice that I can give is prioritizing, is what needs to be done right now. And how long can you give yourself to do it? Because even the stuff that needs to be done right now, you won't be able to do in the same amount of time that you might have done when you're not fully in burnout. So, I mean, I think all of us to some extent are in some kind of burnout all the time. Just because, we're autistic, we're living in a not very nice world that isn't very comfortable. That's extrapolated at the moment because of COVID and the weird stuff and the weird world that we're living in at the minute. And then when you've got children, that gets added to it. And when you're getting to kind of our age and we'd maybe dealing with parents as well, which is very much something I'm doing at the moment, with my mum and also my wife's mum as well. So, you're juggling a lot of things, and then you get burnout thrown into the mix, and it just becomes impossible to do most things, to be honest. So prioritizing, picking out, are the children fed?
Yeah.
Are the children safe?
Yeah.
Are the children as relatively happy as they can be in the environment that you're able to provide for them in that moment? And then are you safe? Are you fed? Are you looking after yourself as best you can in that time? And they're the important things. Everything else can, it's easy to say it can all just get thrown in the waste bin, but it's not as important as those things. Those are the fundamentals that you need to make sure are happening, and everything else just has to take its turn and happen when it happens.
Yeah.
A dusty house never hurt anyone, did it? Or mess and stuff. You can delay those kind of things.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think don't feel guilty for using screen time as well, because we always all these things that can help us, and then people feel bad about it as if it's bad parenting, when that's exactly when sometimes you need the kids to entertain themselves and they can be useful, and you shouldn't feel bad about that.
No, that's it. And we've spoken about screen time before, and I think it's something that will keep coming back to you because it's kind of a bit of a hot parenting topic as such. But the screen time can be educational. Screen time can give your own children time to compress, as well as giving you time, to decompress rather than compress, decompress. That there can exactly be real benefits to it if it keeps your children happy and entertained and safe, then absolutely it can be a real bonus, can't it? Yeah. And that's it, as you say, sometimes it's takeaways or ready meals. They're still keeping your children fed, they're still keeping you fed. It's nice if we're getting kale smoothies every morning. Personally, I hate kale, but okay, sometimes we have to prioritize them. Okay. Okay. So this actually, the thing about screen time then leads really nicely into our next question of guilt. How do you deal with the guilt when especially if you're in burnout for a while? You know, the odd duvet day, takeaway day, screen day is fairly easy, or hopefully fairly easy to write off. But if it's carrying on for weeks and weeks and maybe even longer, how do you forgive yourself?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's really difficult because burnout can go on for years in some cases. You know, but you have to remember there's peaks and flows within that as well. There will be periods during that long-term kind of burnout where you might be nearer to being okay than you're not. So it's not going to be a constant flat level of this is where I am physically, mentally, and emotionally, because you will be riding those kind of waves. So I think it's really easy to say. Again, so much of this is really easy to say because, you know, I'm terrible for this. In the moment, I will be feeling guilty. I will be feeling awful. You know, this is never going to end. I'm never going to pull myself out of it. I'm never going to work again. Like, work is my love. It's my passion, doing this. And there are times when I just physically can't. And it feels like I'm never going to be able to get back to doing anything. So it's, again, like I said, really easy to kind of say this, but you have to grab hold of those good things when you can do them. When you are at a point where you think, oh, actually, you know, I can do this thing that I wanted to do today. I have managed to achieve something today or yesterday. Actually, look what I did. And I might be more exhausted today, but at least I managed to achieve those things. And they were important things for me. You know, it's not like achieving things like filling out tax returns and stuff like that, but stuff that works for you and stuff that invigorates you. I mean, when we talk about autistic children, we talk about intrinsic motivation, about, you know, doing things that the child wants, because that's what makes them happy. And when they're happy, they're going to learn, they're going to enjoy what they're doing. So you have to kind of find your intrinsic motivation when you are in burnout. And that can be difficult sometimes because there are going to be days where it's just not reachable, but some days it will be. So you've just got to grab those days and do what you can within them, and then use that to kind of alleviate that guilt. If you think about it like little oases in the desert, you know, like you're trudging through, you're finding life really difficult, you need that drink, and then you just get enough just to sustain you to the next one, and then to sustain you to the next one. So use that as your water in the desert and kind of drag yourself through it like that. And when you're in the midst of it, like I said, it's really easy to think that it's not going to end, but it does. We all know that we come out the other side of it, whether it's a week, a month, months, years, even sometimes there is an end to it, but it's about making sure that you have those right things in place in order for your body and your brain to kind of get back into where you need to be. And it's knowing yourself is the big answer to that one. So when you're not in burnout, find out about yourself, figure out your sensory needs, figure out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, because when you are in it, you're going to need it.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I've been thinking more about sensory needs. I wrote a blog piece recently, and one of the things I was saying in there was not being afraid to be unconventional in how we parent our children. And I'd mentioned things kind of around kids, so, you know, older children enjoying dummies, children wanting to spend all day in their pajamas. But I think for us as well, to not be afraid around your sensory needs. If you need to just wear sunglasses all the time, just wear sunglasses all the time. This is a me thing, that I actually just need to wear sunglasses when I'm outside.
So do
Otherwise, it just hurts. I'll just get a headache. You know, equally, if you need to have earphones in or headphones in or whatever, just do it. Just do it. Most people don't even notice, actually. And even if they do notice, what does it matter? They're going to notice you a lot more if you cry in the middle of nowhere because everything hurts so much.
Absolutely.
You have to have a thick skin, don't you, when you're autistic parent, or even just a parent of autistic children? You kind of learn to get a thick skin eventually.
Yes.
You have to do things differently, and you do get judged. But
yes,
you get judged more when it goes wrong because you're not doing things in your way. Like you said, when you get a big meltdown. from either you or the kids.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there just will be societal judgment as an autistic person, as an autistic parent. And it is hard. I think it's easier when you're not in that moment to kind of go, "Pah, what does it matter?" But at the moment, the eyes burn a bit, don't they? And I do tend to...
It's taken me a lot of years, really, to be able to do things our way. So I was always upset about what I thought people were thinking or saying, and now but partly it was because I didn't have enough confidence that I was doing things right myself. I tried to do things the way everyone else did it, and it didn't work. Everything was going wrong. So I had no confidence as a parent. But after quite a lot of years of realizing that when I follow my instinct instead of doing what other people tell me, it actually goes much better. I'm now much more confident, so it's easier to have a thick skin, because I can like smugly think, well, actually, I've obviously got something right because they're doing fine now, so I know more than you. And that really helps when you're being judged, if you have that inner confidence that actually you do know what you're doing.
Yes.
I didn't have that for years, as you wouldn't, because I didn't know anything about autism. Like, all I knew was that I had these kids who were really struggling and no idea why.
Yeah. But it does, but living through that is exactly as you say, it's what gives you the confidence, isn't it? Because you've seen what happens when you don't do it right. You've seen what happens when you're not meeting their needs. So you know what it looks like when you are meeting their needs. And if in a moment they do happen to have a meltdown in public, or you happen to have a meltdown in public, then you can know that it's a short-term thing and it's okay, and you'll get through the other side. And on the whole, you've probably built up a skill set of how to cope with a meltdown in public, be it yours or your child's. And again, it will probably look not how society wants it to look. I know I've found that a lot, that people want you to be shouting at your children and threatening violence, and when you're just on their level, holding them or talking nicely to them or just waiting, people get a bit like, you must be doing it wrong.
We had it kind of, that it reminds me of a story actually, when my son was he basically, neither of them have really worn coats for ages, but my son probably hasn't worn coats for about 7 years or something, and we went to school and it just happened to be really cold day, much colder than normal, so he was having a big meltdown, probably because he was frozen. And I always used to carry the coat around with me. They never wore it for years. I was just carrying the coat pointlessly. But he had a huge meltdown, and a mum walked past and she went, "Well, because he's freezing, he needs a coat on." And like, obviously I thought of that, but for him the coat was more painful than being that cold. So the next time it got that cold and he wouldn't wear a coat, we took a blanket. He just went wrapped in a blanket.
Yeah, I've done that a bit. My youngest, she will wear a coat, but only if she's only got one layer underneath it. So she'll wear like a coat and a thin t-shirt. So in the winter she'll still get cold. So I've got a massive buggy that fits my fairly large children in it. That's it. She just goes in the bottom of the buggy with blankets on top of her.
We found a coat, actually, I can't remember the brand, but I can tell you about it after maybe. But that my daughter will accept now. It's really, really thin, but really warm. So it's perfect for her, but still my son won't wear one. So he just wears hoodies.
Yeah. Shoes is the other one.
Yeah.
So my children are not keen on shoes. No, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because then as a grown-up, when we're talking about being in burnout and feeling everything's just a bit sharper, isn't it, in burnout? And so those small things that you've just kind of learned to deal with, like I need to wear shoes when I go out in public, becomes that much harder. And I don't know if you guys find this, but I find that it can be still, as a grown-up, challenging for me to work out why it's hard, like what it is that's bothering me. Do you know that I'll go outside and just be like, I'm just uncomfortable and irritated and itchy and I don't quite know why, and it can take me a few times to be like, my shoes hurt, or my coat's too hot, or whatever it is, which kind of, as a grown-up, I think I should be able to find this faster, but it take me a while to work out what it is.
That's the magic of interoception, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
it's, but then we have that expectation that as a grown-up, I should have figured this stuff out by now. But of course you don't, because we've spent years actually deliberately not figuring it out, because we don't. If we think about it, then that's when the whole mask drops off, So that's the whole point of it, that we've spent our whole lives deliberately not looking into the reasons why these things happen. We just know we have to do these things because that's what we're told, and that's what's expected of us. And it's interesting, when you were talking, I was actually, I think about masking all the time, obviously, but I was thinking about, actually, what Shona was saying is really indicative. People constantly ask, like, how do you stop masking? And that's exactly what Shona said. Years of kind of figuring these little things out, working through these things, and actually learning not to give a stuff about what other people think about them. That's how you stop masking. And burnout is a really, really good learning tool. That's really weird to say that burnout can actually have a positive element to it, but when you're in burnout, that effectively means that you are unable to sustain your mask.
Yeah.
So if you are unable to sustain your mask, that means the things that you were doing previously are now unachievable for you. So actually, that's a good time to question, are they now unachievable because you shouldn't have been doing them?
Yeah.
Because they're not good for you, because they're the things that have led you to being burnt out in the first place.
Yeah.
Like wearing shoes as an adult, you don't have to wear shoes. Yeah. Nobody says you have to wear shoes, and if shoes are uncomfortable, why are you wearing them? Yeah. It's those little things, and it does take years of kind of building up that confidence to be able to do it. But yet we see people doing things like that all the time. I literally this morning saw an advert flashed up on my phone for an article about Chris Hemsworth and his wife, because his wife had gone out with no shoes on.
Right.
Oh my God, the horror. And but then there was like all these like celebrity, like fashion commentators going, oh yeah, this is wonderful, and people should be able to go out with no shoes, and it's like, well, okay then, why don't they? Because you tell them not to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's funny. Yes, one of the things that I've done over the last few years, since my youngest was born, pretty much, is I've stopped wearing uncomfortable clothes. Which again sounds ridiculous. Why would you wear uncomfortable clothes? But particularly as a woman, I feel the societal expectation to wear tight things and stuff that you can't move in properly, and stuff that, is made of itchy material and frilly stuff and all of that. And when I had my youngest, it felt ridiculous that in my mid-30s, I kind of thought, wait a minute, I don't have to. I can just literally live in leggings and dungarees and nobody cares. Oh yeah, I could just do that. I could just literally throw all my jeans away. I don't like jeans. I've never liked. Why do I wear them? I don't have to. I can literally just give them all to charity. All my uncomfortable dresses, charity. Off you go. And that pregnancy for me is a big one. Yeah. It's just exhausting. And says she who's had 4 babies, but every time I found it exhausting, and just switches off all of those things that you could tolerate. I'm not tolerating those anymore.
That's funny, actually, because I was reading a thread on Twitter literally just before we came on, and it was somebody talking about an autistic lady talking about having her period, and then obviously all senses are just massively increased, and pain is more obvious, and all of those kind of things. And I would imagine pregnancy must be the same kind of sensations, where you're just on fire the whole time. And
it smells, for me, really hard to tolerate.
Yeah. I remember, particularly with my first, I remember standing in a supermarket queue and having an old lady in front of me who'd done that old lady thing where she smelt quite a lot like she'd literally just poured perfume on her head before she'd left the house. And actually having to talk to myself, don't be sick on her, don't be sick on her. I didn't. I'm very pleased to say I did not throw up on the back of an old lady, but it would have
been a better story.
I know, yeah. I could embellish it if you like, but it was very touch and go. And yeah, I found that through all of my pregnancies, that my sense of smell just went through the roof, and I couldn't. Food and perfume and just other people. People who think it's okay to go on public transport when they don't smell good.
Yeah.
It's not. I know that's enormously ableist of me. I know that there are reasons for it, really, and pregnant people can deal with it, but I certainly found it hard when I was pregnant.
There is an element of privilege around that, though, especially around the kind of clothing thing and stuff. Because when you were talking, I was thinking, I wear polo t-shirts. That's all I wear, and I've got 4 pairs of the same stretchy jeans.
Yeah,
that's it. I wear the same clothes every day, like obviously different colors and things, but they're the same clothes. But I'm a man and I can get away with that.
Yeah.
Whereas a woman, if she was wearing the same clothes all the time, there would be elements of criticism there, wouldn't there? And judgment. And it's not fair.
No, it is a very weird double societal standard. And as well, we do have, and well, I'm assuming you to a certain degree, but certainly for me, my work gives me the privilege as well that I don't need to wear a uniform, so I can just I wear leggings and t-shirt to work as well, and dungarees to work, because it doesn't matter. But yes, that's it. There will be times where, I mean, work's a big one, isn't it? It was one of our questions actually, was work and burnout. Because this is it. It's very privileged to be able to say rest when you need to rest, wear comfy clothes all the time. Actually, lots of people can't do that. What would you say around those people that just need to work, but equally will probably then more likely experience burnout because you need to work?
I mean, it's interesting. I'm surprised this didn't come up when we were talking a lot about reasonable adjustments a couple of weeks ago. Because actually this could be built into that, and that's something you've just sparked something there that I've actually never thought about before, about projecting forward and anticipating periods where you're going to go through burnout. If you're lucky enough to have a relationship with your employer where you can talk about reasonable adjustments, and those things generally happen. We talked a few weeks ago about how that should be a living document and it should be changing all the time. So burnout should be playing into that as well, to anticipate that there are going to be times where you are not going to be as productive as normal, and there are very good reasons for that. So what can you do looking forward to prepare for those kind of periods? And could that be, if you have to wear a uniform, is there a way you can not wear it, or is there a way you could do a different role rather than that role while you're in that period of burnout? So maybe you're not on the shop floor, or you're not wherever you would normally be, where you have to wear that uniform and things like that. So that's one potential kind of way of looking at it. Are there things that you can put in place to mitigate it? Obviously not everybody has that privilege, because not everybody has that relationship with their employers, as we clearly know. Again, there's no simple answer in that respect. When you have a job, you have to go. But we can be signed off for periods of mental health. We all know that. So that might be a possible way of it's not cheating the system, but it's using the system for its purpose. You might not be able to be signed off because you're in autistic burnout, because GPs might not know and understand what autistic burnout is, because as we know, there's only now 2 pieces of research in the world on autistic burnout. But there is research into burnout in other areas, which, there is parent carer burnout and those kind of things. So you could use those to be signed off for a short period of time. And it's obviously not holiday time. You're not going away abroad and having a lovely, lovely time. You're literally decompressing, which is what you need in that period to kind of reset yourself. So maybe that might be a way of looking at it as well.
Yeah. No, that seems like a really healthy idea. And you're right, that relates back nicely to what we were talking about on I think it was our last one, wasn't it?
It was the last one, I think.
Yeah, fantastic. And then it actually leads to another question we had, which was explaining burnout to the NT people in your life, whether that's your boss, but equally your friends, your family, people in your children's school playground, like whoever that would ask you why you look like a bag of poo. But hopefully in nicer words than that, or might notice that you look somewhat rough, and wonder whether you've just turned to the drink. How do you explain it? I'm probably not wording this well. You know what I mean?
I look like a bag of poo. I think that should be that qualifies. I feel like a bag of poo as well. So there you go. I'm just thinking, when I'm in burnout. It's true. It's not part of it too. So how do you explain it? It's Well, firstly, it's not depression. That's really important. I think a lot of people, well, I don't think it, I know it. A lot of people get confused between the two, and doctors and things get confused between the two as well, because there isn't much awareness of what burnout means for autistic people. But I think, again, most people would know what parent carer burnout looks like, or when you are going through rough periods at work, which would be described probably not as depression, but as a kind of burnout. So those narratives are already there. But I mean, the way that I describe burnout personally is it's the physical and mental and emotional equivalent of wading through treacle. And as you're wading through that treacle, bits are dropping off. So like bits of skills are just dropping off and being left behind you. So that might be your memory recall. It might be your recall for words. It might be your recall for people's names. You know, and I've been fluctuating through burnout through this kind of 6-week summer holiday period, because work was really, really intense leading up to this. And there's a lot of stuff going on at home. So, and I've noticed lately, I was actually really worried about coming on here, because I thought, because this is actually the first live that I've done in quite a few weeks. And I was worried I would come on and be like, luckily I've clicked into gear and it hasn't happened. But, you know, that does happen. So it's kind of, and even when we're talking about little children, and we talk about little children, autistic children who, you know, they regress. And, you know, and that's when we first find out they're autistic. No, they're in burnout. That's usually, there's associations there with socialization. And so the best way to describe it, I think, is like that. And just that life's harder at the moment, and that gravity's that bit stronger, and that everything is a little bit more difficult. And the reason for that is because most of the time you're putting on such a front to make it look like that everything's great, and it isn't. You know, and I think, if someone has taken notice enough to say, are you okay, they've probably taken notice enough to be able to hear your answer as well. Other people probably wouldn't. They might think that you don't look very okay, or that you look like a bag of poo, but they might not bring it up. But if someone actually has the kind of, knows you well enough that they can recognize that everything isn't okay, then probably they're open to hearing you say those things, because, you know, it is different for us, and it is difficult. And this isn't just an autism thing. This is a neurodivergent thing. This is a disabled thing. And, you know, the life is harder generally. So, you know, of course, we're going to be putting more energy into existing. So therefore, of course, we're going to have periods where we can't exist as well.
Good. Shall we? Jules has joined us, and she comes and does the admin stuff because my brain can't cope with it. Shall we pause because we're halfway through? Have we got any live comments, questions, queries, anything we can put towards Kieran or Shona?
We've got an anonymous question in. What do we do when we as the parent are on the verge of a meltdown in public? Any advice?
Obviously, it very much depends on the person, and it very much depends on how much you can limit and minimize your burnout if you don't want to do it publicly and you don't want it to happen publicly. Fairly, not so much now, but it used to fairly frequently happen to me. And I had enough cognitive awareness at that moment to kind of just get out of whatever situation I was in. You know, grab the kids and run. Simple as that. And I've got 3 autistic children, so they know what meltdowns are. So if they see dad having a meltdown, then it's okay, that's safe, because they know that they have them as well. So, you know, and we talk about this stuff all the time, obviously, when meltdowns are not happening. So, you know, to go bundle them back to the car or whatever, or get them somewhere safe where it can just happen. But even then, in those moments, I would always try and keep it in control as much as I can, which again isn't always easy. But, you know, and then holding that until I get to, again, this is using your mask. It's a real, you know, using it as a tool, and holding it together as much as you possibly can until you are in a safe enough space that it can come out, and you know that nothing untoward's going to happen as a result of it, or because obviously we all have fears about things like that happening in public, and then people calling the police, or people getting distressed or whatever, and intervening when they shouldn't be intervening, and what might happen as a result of that, and obviously the safety of our children if it's happening when we're out and about. So it is about managing that as best as possible. But this is why wherever I go, even when I'm going to familiar places, whether we're going as a family, whether I'm going on my own, I always have escape routes set up. I always have contingency plans set up wherever I'm going, so that I know if something happens out of the blue, whether that might be one of the kids might get upset and we need to leave, or it might be my wife might get upset and we need to leave, or things just become overwhelming. We know that we can just go, right, that's it, we're going. And we do. So it's always about that kind of planning ahead and mitigating as much as you can. But then if you are in those situations, it's about having as much control as you can over that situation, which again is a really privileged thing to do, because some of us don't have any control over that. And then you've got to ride out whatever the consequences are of that, unfortunately.
Any more, Jules?
And suggestions for ear defenders, noise cancelling headphones, earplugs, things like that. We've had a bit of discussion. I don't know, I'm not any brand in here, but I do have both. So I've got my noise cancelling headphones, lots of brands available. And I also got these little fellas. I've just getting I think it's just fallen off my desk. Oh!
Literally just fallen off your desk.
Jules is falling off my
desk. Let me just pick them up, but they're just little earplugs, and they're from Flare Audio, but I think there's quite a lot of people do them now, and they direct the sound a little bit easier. So when I'm out and about, if I'm in a restaurant or anything like that, they do really help me focus on the person I'm talking to and drown out a lot. They don't work as well as noise cancelling headphones, but they are a little bit of a calming measure. So I know there's a few brands of those if anyone wants to have a look at them.
With the noise cancelling headphones, it very much depends on the person as well, because some brands work really well for some people and others don't. I use Sennheiser ones, which tend to be more expensive, but if I need a new pair, I always wait until kind of Black Friday and things like that, when I can get them like really reduced. But I don't use the real expensive ones. I just use whatever's available. But I find them really comfortable. Other people don't find the fit of them comfortable, or find that they don't block out enough noise. So it's very, very much an individual thing, which is hard because you can't go to a headphone shop and try on headphones because they won't let you. So it is a matter of trial and error.
Is it because of COVID they won't let you?
No, I've been to a few headphone shops actually over the course of the last few years, and it's a hygiene thing, I think.
I tried mine at John Lewis. John Lewis let you.
Oh, do they?
And that was really good because it was really noisy up there. So I tried them. I don't know if they have certain ones that they have set aside for people to try or whatever.
Like display ones or?
Yeah, it was really good because of how noisy it was. And it was amazing to tell the difference when I had them on versus not. And then I bought Bose ones. And I've never tried any others because I think there are much cheaper ones nowadays, and I probably should try others. But when you're autistic and you find one that work, and then just stick with those.
That's exactly what I do.
Everybody nodding.
Yeah.
You just go, but that's my favourite.
Yeah, I've never tried any others, but that's my favourite.
Flare ones seem to work really well, actually, though, the ones that Jules mentioned, the in-ear ones. I know Autistic Science Person who has a blog, they're on Twitter. They've done quite a few reviews because hyperacusis is one of their real special interests. So they've done lots of work around kind of sound and stuff like that, and the Flare ones seem to be really, really popular.
I've been looking at those because I'd like to have something around the house, but I don't want to block out all the noise around the house because I have 4 children who will push each other down stuff, fall over things, need help with toileting, all the kind of general children stuff that's not really cool if I just go, oh.
Them and the sunglasses.
Happy bubble. Yeah, not really cool. But so I've been thinking about it because when I go out by myself, I put very loud music on like unsociably loud music on, but I'm by myself, so it doesn't matter. But I can't do that when I'm with the kids, because again, especially if we're out in town and I'm just, I can't hear you at all, really not cool. But I was thinking, because I got my tragus pierced, I didn't know if I'd be able to do it, but yeah, good to think about. What else? Is there anything else that's come up on the live, or shall I come back to my ones?
On the live for now, but I'll keep watching.
Super. Thank you, Jules. Thank you for those. I didn't want to forget, leave them all at the end, and because we'll go off on tangents, won't we? Yeah. Okay. Oh, this was a good one. So one of the things that myself and the people who I was discussing the questions with have found is that when we're feeling very overwhelmed, when we're feeling burnt out, you get a lot of suggestions of like, oh, just spend some time by yourself, pop to the gym, go to town, go and get a cup of coffee, whatever it is that makes you feel nice and makes you feel a little bit rested and relaxed. But then you get like comeback, because if you spend time away from your children, they'll be fine while you're gone, and then you come back and they go, oh, I've just been saving all of this for you.
They make you.
And whether you've been away for an hour or 5 hours or even an overnight stay, that's how much stress I've saved up just for you. And so you it undoes any amount of kind of rest and brain space that you've had, because you get this barrage of this is what I've been holding in, and I need to just share with you. Any kind of suggestions of what can be done around that, how to kind of handle it, mitigate it?
Not go back. Stay away. Obviously no. I mean, I guess if you know it's going to happen, the obvious thing is to prepare for it. And maybe not realistic for some families, maybe would work for others, is to give your children a window of opportunity when you come back to have your undivided attention, so that they know that when mum or dad or whoever is coming back after their period of 5 minutes of grace, that each child's going to have 20 minutes, or something like that, just so that, because that's really what it is. It's about wanting your attention back, isn't it? It's like, this person hasn't been gone, I have not been able to get any attention for them, and now they're back, I want all the attention. And when you've got multiple children, that then becomes a competition between them as well sometimes, doesn't it? So, but then also knowing that you've had your calm and you've had your downtime, and you're going to go back into some environment where you're probably going to get triggered quite quickly and quite easily, because it's going to be really overwhelming really quickly. So the more you can control that return, the more you put those things in place to say, you will have my attention, and then you will have my attention, and then you will have my attention. And that might be hard, because sometimes these are boundaries that we don't like doing, because we want to give our kids all the attention. Exactly that happens with me, that scenario that you come back and the kids are like, da, 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 da. And then you're like, I don't know where to look, I don't know what to do, you're really overwhelming me, and you're really triggering me right now, and everybody just go away because I need another 5 hours away. So if you can control that in some way and keep that kind of balanced and mitigated, but even things like coming back in, wearing your headphones and not taking them off straight away, not taking your sunglasses off straight away, making sure that you just ease yourself back into the situation. That's probably the best thing that you can do. And it's hard when your kids are obviously older, that doesn't happen as much, or it happens in different ways. But when they're younger, they don't know that they're overwhelming you. It's not their fault. They're just happy to see you and want to share all the things, whether they are bad things or good things, or whether they've spent 5 hours absolutely in blissful peace and quiet with their brother or sister, and then 3 seconds of arguing has destroyed all that, and they want to tell you all this stuff. So just balance it and minimize it and soften it for yourself as much as you can.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been trying, particularly when I go out of the house, because some of my escaping is this stuff where I'm not actually out of the house, my kids are only in another room, but particularly when I go out of the house, is when I come back in, is saying hello to everybody and then going and making a cup of tea. and saying, you can talk to me a bit when I'm in the kitchen, but I'm just going to make a cup of tea and I can't look at what you want me to look at or do what you need me to do until I've made a cup of tea, and then I'll sit down with my cup of tea and then we can talk. And it's, as you say, it's that a little cushion, a little buffer. And it means I've got, you know, like my cup of tea is like my little nice controlled sensory input.
You can squeeze it really hard.
But also I like it at just only not giving me burning temperature kind of thing, and it gives you a nice kind of sensory input that helps to dull everything else because your mouth's on fire.
This is hard because we're masking around our children.
And, which we've spoken about before.
And it's absolutely okay to say to your kids, you are overwhelming me right now. You need to back off and give me a little bit of space just to ease me back in. It's absolutely okay to do that and not to just kind of hold it all in. And because then what you're doing is just contributing back to your burnout and the reasons you needed that break in the first place. You're just letting it all build back up again. So, you know, and as our children get older, I've seen this with we have, you know, we've talked about this before, having lots of deep conversations with them about all sorts of things. And this is one of the things that we talk about here, that as my kids get older, I talk to them about how triggering they are. And it's not their fault, but this is the reality of 5 neurodivergent people living in a house together, that we are going to be triggering each other all the time. And those things are going to be happening. So as they get older, they will learn not only to regulate themselves, but how you can have a conversation with them about how parents need to regulate as well, and about it's okay for all those things to happen. Yes.
Yeah, I talk to my kids quite a bit about, I know sometimes I really annoy you, and that's fine. And you can tell me that I really annoy you. And if it is possible for me to stop doing that thing, I will stop doing it. But sometimes.
Or sometimes do it more.
Yeah, I do try not to purposely annoy my kid. But that's it. But they're equally, some of the things you do are hard for me. And I'll always be your mummy and I'll always love you. And it's always okay. But sometimes it's really hard, and I feel the same as you feel, but just as a grown-up, you know.
But it's good to have those conversations, because these are how boundaries develop, and this is how our kids learn a good sense of boundaries, where they will not feel kind of rejected if someone says to them, Shona's got to go mum taxi duties, they will not feel rejected when someone says to them no, because someone else has said to them no, and then they will not feel like they're going to reject someone else by saying no to them and saying, please stop that. And it's okay to develop those boundaries. And this is just good parenting. It's teaching them how to grow up to be well-rounded adults that can advocate for themselves, but can also be on the receiving end of advocacy as well.
Yeah. I've started kind of praising my children. I know it sounds weird, but actually praising my children even when they shout no, and that and saying, okay, you're making it really clear that that's what you want, and I'm going to respect that. You know, that well done for standing up for yourself and saying what you really need to happen. I think all of these are actually some of the advantages, aren't they, of being an autistic parent, particularly with autistic children, to help normalize it all as well. You know, with the question there about meltdowns in public, being able to talk to your kids about it afterwards and just saying, yeah, it happens to me too. Rubbish, isn't it? But there we go. It's just the way it goes. And can you see what I did? You know, I went here and I did this, and maybe that could work for you.
Safe
yeah, exactly. Which we did have a question actually about children experiencing burnout as well, because as much as we experience burnout as parents, it's also very common for our autistic children to go through periods of burnout, and how to help them, particularly with children in school, you know, where school is still expecting them to go and may not be very understanding, but also around social expectations, where they might not be able to meet those, of how to help, how to make their life easier.
Again, not an easy topic. I mean, especially around school, because that's a massive one, and that's a problem that's probably the biggest issue amongst autistic school children, in terms of the narratives around school refusal and things like that. really what we're talking about is a child in autistic burnout who is unable to cope in that situation. And the reason they're unable to cope in that situation is because the situation isn't right for them and hasn't been from an extended period. Luke Bearden's golden equation here, you know, autism plus environment equals outcome. Environment in schools generally isn't the right environment. On multiple levels. And when we talk about environment, it's not just the geographical environment, it's the situational environment, and it's the people within that environment, the social environment as well. So you have to think about it on all those kind of levels. And that's why lots of autistic children go through these periods where school is impossible. If you have reached the point where school has become impossible and the child is unable to attend, then you're probably too far in it to do anything in terms of mitigation or helping them having any kind of immediate impact in anything that you can put in place. The time to put stuff in is before that you get to that point, you know, when there's less obvious signs for some parents, and they're not obvious signs for teachers at all. But I think probably those of us who are autistic and understand that we're autistic and what that means will recognize our children getting to those points better than we recognize them in ourselves, probably. So that might be something like, obviously, if you have an amenable school, building in things like regular decompression days, where you just phone up and say they're not coming in.
Yeah.
And you do something which is good for them that they want to do. So that might be, I don't know, going to the pictures, or it might be spending a day under a blanket, or whatever work, or going out to the woods. And I mean, natural sensory information is always really good for anyone that's in any kind of burnout. It doesn't mean you have to go on a 75-mile hike, but surround yourself with green, water, things like that, where there's natural sensory input coming in. And that can really help you reset yourself and kind of to regulate yourself. And it's all this electricity that we have around us, which causes a lot of the problems sometimes. Yeah. But the flip side of that, if a child needs to zone in on their tablet, and if that's kind of, you know, they can do some self-directed learning through their tablet, they can play games, whatever it is that they're doing, but that might be what they need to do. They might need to hyper-focus on something for a period of time in order to reset. So they're the things that you can probably better put in place before you get to the point where burnout is really, really happening. Once you're in burnout, time, patience, withdrawal demands, all of those kind of things. Actually, a lot of the things that we might talk around kind of PDA children, actually changing your language, how you talk to them, and things like that, to make the pressure as little as possible. And it might take weeks, it might take months, you know, it's the same for us as adults, it's the same for them as children, and the same things kind of apply. But a lot of this is around, again, like time, patience, and just pulling back, dialing everything back. And if you think you're doing things in baby steps, they're probably still too big. You know, just tiny increments, and just push a little bit, see where you go. If nothing happens, you dial it back again, and you just keep doing that. But all of that comes with a massive condition of having a school that will give you, or a local authority that will give you the time and opportunity to do that. And there is a very good reason that my youngest is not in school anymore and is off-rolled because of that. So
it's hard, isn't it? It's what my children are home educated, and it was apparent, my second, particularly who's a PDA, it was just apparent even when she was a small child that school was not going to work for her, and we were in the privileged position that we could just make that choice and say, okay, you don't need to go to school. And I can't see how school would ever be a place that she would be okay. Just the amount of time that she needs off, you know, that she can just do what she wants, is in like several days a week. She needs just nothing. You know, I can go in and say to her in the morning, do you fancy doing something today? And if the answer's no, then the answer's no. It's just as simple as that. Okay, cool, no problems, it's fine. But we've built a lifestyle around that. That's always okay. And you know, as we said, with lots of the things we've talked about, unfortunately, that is quite a privileged position to be in, to just be able to go, okay, cool, yeah, we're just all right, we're just not going to do anything today. And I mean, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that's the hard thing, because when we are talking about kind of, kids that are in school, and we are talking about school refusal, you've gone past the point of burnout and you're into real mental health problems then. So, so it needs to be recognized earlier and things need to be put in place. And a lot of that is around kind of the expectation of school. Get rid of homework, rip it up, throw it out the window. You don't do homework anymore. Thinking about things like uniform and stuff like that. And because there will be so much negative sensory stuff going on that you as a parent do not know is happening, that the child will not know is happening. Stuff we were talking about earlier about not recognizing when shoes hurt and stuff like that. Things like that will be happening to the children all the time. And then you add to that issues around communication, issues around expectations of behavior, just everything is obviously pathologized through a teacher's perspective. And that child is furiously making reasonable adjustments just to be there. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reasonable adjustments just to exist within that school building. And they are unaware that they are making most of them. And everybody else is unaware, teachers, staff, everybody, and you as a parent are unaware of exactly how many reasonable adjustments that child is making to make everybody else feel better. So that they don't become the problem. It's no wonder they're burning out. And it's more of that needs to be recognized. So the more that you can put in place in school, if you have an amenable school, the more understanding there can be around that, the more homeschool positive relationship there can be, where you can phone school up and say, they're not well, they're not right, I'm just giving them the day off because they need it. If you can get to a place like that, which again is super privileged because for most of us that doesn't happen, that's going to help massively. But there does come the question then of, is school the right place for them? If they are repeatedly getting into burnout or repeatedly getting to the point where they can't attend school, that's where we really need to think about, is school the right place for them?
It's hard though, isn't it? Because I know I come across this online, I'm sure you come across it online as well, where lots of families are recognizing that school is not potentially the best place for their autistic children, but they just don't have a choice because the parents have got to work. There isn't somebody else who can have the children reliably in the daytime. What can you do? We've got a society set up that expects all grown-ups to work and all children to go to school, and anything outside of that does make you a square peg in a round hole. And as autistic people, we're already living that anyway. And to have that then more so by how are we going to cope with this, and
then you have the triggers on from that as well, that if you do decide not to live that life, what's that going to trigger in terms of professional services or local authorities getting interested, sniffing around, social workers, those kind of things, who then, if you fall into those patterns, life can become become more difficult and more problematic. And even you think that taking your children or deciding that your children aren't going to attend school or taking them out of school is going to fix things, and it doesn't. It just gets you a different level of attention from a different part of a local authority. So like living in Durham, we have to prove, we have to jump through hoops every year to, otherwise we get threats of children will be taken back to school and forcibly put back, and none of those things are legally enforceable, but the threat is there, and the threat is enough to trigger anxiety and worry and worries about, then am I going to have to go through tribunals and courts and all of those kind of things. There's an underlying threat to everything, and that's a really difficult way to live. And as parents of autistic children, and being autistic people as parents of autistic children as well, living with threat like that is exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting.
Yes, I find even just the potential of it actually makes me really stressed. My local authority are all right. I send them a report once a year, and that they're okay with that. That's fine. But I know that there's always various rumours and rumblings about it's going to change and we need to sign a register and maybe we'll need to do the national curriculum and this and that. And I have to keep removing myself from conversations, from groups, from online spaces where it's discussed, because I just find it so overwhelming, the potential of it, because my brain just goes, right, we're just going to run away then. Okay, if that's the case, we're just going to go and live in a hut in the woods so that nobody can find us, because we're not doing that. So I'm just going to run off, because if I've got a choice between filling enormous amounts of stressful paperwork out that's written in legalese or running off and living in the woods,
Woods it is.
the woods sound really appealing. I really, really hate paperwork. And you know, there is things like that there's an enormous positive correlation between parents that can afford solicitors and parents whose children's SOAs get turned over, statutory attendance orders get turned over. You know, it's that kind of thing that you just go, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
It's just wrong. We shouldn't have this system. We shouldn't have this in place. We shouldn't have, I mean, I'm really aware that probably, I mean, I think my LA are okay anyway, but I know that there's a decent amount of middle-class white person. Yeah, you want to home educate your kids, go ahead. I can see it on the home ed groups. You can see the people that get picked on, and it isn't people that look like me.
No.
And it's, again, it just, makes me want to run away and go and live in the woods, never talk to anybody ever again. But it doesn't seem like a reasonable choice, really.
It does to me. That sounds like bliss. I keep talking about my island.
One of my kids won't enter the woods, that absolutely hate them. All the rest of us love them, but just one of them, woods is absolutely no. We'd have to live on the beach, and then you have all kinds of problems.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. I have an island. My family don't know this, but in my head, I have an island, and we are going there at some point. It will happen that we'll just up sticks and leave and live off the land. I know I can do that. They might not be able to do it, but I can live without electricity. So.
These are my running away fantasies. All my running away fantasies are going and living in woods. Yeah. I think that we've got off topic. Jules, are there any live questions come through?
There's one. It's not exactly a question, but talking about guilt over not being as present or being absent, not being as connected, etc. Really big. And yet there's rarely adequate spaces to talk about this. So particularly for autistic parents in burnout who don't feel like putting their autistic children to daycare will be all that beneficial or peaceful for everyone. It's often hard to be okay with not providing as much as we'd love to, and as we're constantly told children need. So if there was more to say about how to deal with the guilt, I'd love to hear it. That's from Eston.
I think if you look at this objectively, if you think about, many of us have had parents who have struggled. Us as adults have had parents who have struggled, and who we now look at through maybe a different lens than we did in the past, where we look at them as potentially undiagnosed autistic people or unrecognized neurodivergent people. And for many of us, the experience of our parents isn't great, where they did disappear for large elements of our life, or didn't maybe treat us as well as they could have done. So I think you have to firstly forgive yourself, because from those of us that have had those experiences, you're not reliving them with your children, first of all, because the fact that you're here having these conversations and wanting to know the answers to these conversations means that you're not repeating the same things that happened before. We do have a little bit more privilege because we do have a window to understand ourselves and recognize that there are different ways of doing things which maybe our parents didn't have access to, and so on and so on. I am not tangenting here, I promise. There is a point to this bit. But in terms of the guilt and the shame, I think as long as you are having these conversations with your kids, and as long as you are talking to them about the fact that there are going to be periods in their life when they are going to struggle because of these exact same reasons, and that there have been times when they've been unable to go to school, or where they've felt like they've maybe progressed and then have just dropped back a bit, or, you know, haven't had the energy to do things, or all those things. As long as you are having those conversations, it's going to be okay. That your children are going to grow up more well-rounded than those of us who grew up in environments where our parents just dropped us or treated us badly because they were having bad experiences. So I think you've got to kind of weigh it up in terms of a bigger picture kind of scenario and situation. And that doesn't mean the guilt's going to go from you. Nothing's going to take that guilt away. Nothing's probably really going to minimize it. It's something that we all have to carry and we all have to deal with. But we have to make sure that we don't confuse that guilt with our internalized ableism. We do have to forgive ourselves, because there are times when we can't do the things that we need to do. That's just a fact. And beating ourselves up over that fact is not going to make it any easier. It's going to make it more difficult and more challenging when we can't do those things. So a lot of this is around working on yourself as a person and figuring out yourself. And, you know, oh, look, that's trauma. Oh, look, that's being autistic. Oh, look, that's being ADHD. We can do those things to degrees. Sometimes it's hard to pick apart all of those things, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's really apparent that I'm acting in a certain way because my parents treated me in a certain way when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. So unraveling all that is really, really key. But you are going to carry guilt and shame and blame, because we are surrounded by a society that gives us guilt and blame and shame, and tells us that we should feel bad if we're not doing things, and tells us that we should feel bad if we're not taking our kids off on holiday every 6 weeks. Or, you know, I look at the clamor of people in the UK that are desperate to go abroad in the middle of this pandemic because they need a holiday. You need a holiday. You've been told and conditioned that you need 2 weeks holiday. You've taught yourself that you need 2 weeks holiday. Yes, of course, we all need downtime, but we balance risk and we balance guilt and we balance shame, and we do things in a way which keeps ourselves and other people safe. You know, it's all about, I'm probably rambling all over the place, but this frustrates me a bit, because we have to carry this shame, but it's how we deal with it that's really, really important. And we have to carry this guilt, and it's recognizing that how much of that guilt is actually us saying, well, we should be doing these things for our kids because our kids need them, but weighing that up against, well, I can't give that to my children because I'm incapable of doing that at this moment in time. So we talk to our children and we make sure that they understand as they grow older that mum or dad or whoever isn't doing less with you or giving you less attention because we don't like you. We're giving you less attention or we're doing less for you because we just can't meet your needs right now. And that's really hard to deal with, but there will be times when you can't meet your own needs, or you won't be able to meet other people's needs because you're struggling. So being honest about that, people aren't honest with their kids enough. Mm-hmm. And I think that's real life. That's realism. It's not being negative. It's not being pessimistic. It's not, you know, or flipping it the other way. It's not hiding it because you're being super optimistic that this will never happen to you, because that's not real life. Of course it's going to happen. It happens to all of us, whether we're rich or poor or whatever. There are times when we can't do what we have to do. So therefore we mitigate that as best we can, and we carry our guilt and we talk about our guilt. And they're right that these conversations don't go on enough. These are the conversations that really need to be happening. I know everyone's bickering over language and stuff like that and things, which is important, but there are other important things that need to be talk about. And these are the kind of the taboo subjects, I think, for autistic people, and particularly autistic parents, that we don't get a platform and a space to talk about this kind of stuff. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, that was fantastic. That was really, really lovely points. I think the only thing that
something coherent in there.
There was definitely coherent stuff. Yeah. The only thing that I might add to it as well is particularly the wording in the question about and Kieran picked up on it a bit, that we're told constantly that our children need this and that and the other. And I find it useful to look back through human history and through human evolution and go, well, biologically, we're not really very different than when we were living in caves. And children then were coping with sticks and basically just doing small versions of whatever it was the parents were doing, some degree of hunter-gathering type stuff. And they grew up to be sufficient grown-ups, you know, and I know that times were different, but same kind of thing applies. If our children are just exposed to this is what life as a grown-up is like, then actually they don't really need a lot else to grow up and be decent human beings, you know, that you know, as Kieran was saying, like, we don't actually need loads of holidays, we don't actually need loads of things. It's just truth and experience and inviting them to share your life and loving them. Yeah.
It's enough. It really, really is enough. And it's, you know, when you think about, again, I kind of mentioned, you know, those of us that grew up with parents that were maybe more detached from us or distant or didn't treat us very well. Actually, those things that you just mentioned are the things that we're probably missing from our lives. You know, things aren't important. It's about that family and that support and that honesty and being able to have those conversations and the love that's shared amongst that and the relationships and communication that we develop between our, and, you know, we talk about autistic parents don't have hierarchical relationships with their children unless they're masking furiously. You know, that we have this kind of more level playing field where we're not friends, but our relationship is equal and it's built on compromise and trust and sharing and parallel play and parallel experiences and all of those kind of things and parallel conversations. Everything is parallel because that's balance. So if you can get as close to that balance as possible with love, trust, communication, all of those kind of things, all those things that you want to maybe get them or the places you want to take them, and all that's going to do is do this and make the power imbalance go really, really wobbly and make you probably feel worse because you're going to put all your energy in doing trips and, you know, going to the museum or going here and going there and going to the soft play or whatever. And yes, your children might enjoy those things and they might need those things, but do they need them all the time? We talk about children getting bored now. There is no reason for any child in the world to be bored. Not in Western culture anyway, you know, because we have access to so many different things to keep us interested and entertained. You know, the reason we all ran off into the fields when we were young, making ourselves sound really old now, but we all like went off into the fields and played and things like that and played with sticks and stuff like that because we literally had nothing else to do. We had to create entertainment. And I think things have become too reliant on handing entertainment to our children and being entertaining for our children because we're told that that's what we have to be now. It's that kind of helicopter parenting thing, isn't it, where we're there all the time, but actually a bit of distance is sometimes good for them, and a bit of self-sufficiency and independence and all of those kind of things. And I really am waffling now. I know.
No, you're not. You're fine. I think some of that as well has come from the kind of the dissolution of community.
Yeah,
that it was much easier when we were kids for your kids to, you know, we used to play out on the street or that's it, go off to local green spaces or whatever and play, because there was always somebody around who knew who you were, who knew who your mum was, who knew what street you lived on, and if you were in trouble it was be okay kind of thing, or not far off, you know. Yeah. And I think that doesn't really, and I do come across some people where they've still got that, but I think a lot of people don't, and so we find ourselves being the primary source of entertainment for our children because there isn't that little
distance
anymore. That it doesn't really, we distrust our neighbours and this is a society thing, not an autistic thing. I think that we tend to distrust each other a bit.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a real social issue there where things have gone horribly wrong somewhere. There's a lot of isolationism, isn't there? And
statistically this is the safest time for children. Like and the UK is still one of the safest countries in the world, you know.
But everybody is petrified and terrified. But
we're all frightened, and you know, there is some odd stuff I think going on from a societal level, but that is a massive tangent for
well, let's not get into the realms of sociology.
Just start it back. Any more?
No, but do you know actually what you've just said though, it does lead us really back nicely to burnout, because all of what you're talking about there is pressure.
Yeah.
And pressure is one of the biggest things that lead us into burnout. It's feeling that pressure and then adhering to that pressure and doing what that pressure wants us to do, wherever that pressure comes from, whether it's society, family, work, wherever. It's those things that lead us into being burnt out. So the more you can resist that pressure and the more you can find your own path and, you know, amongst that, figure yourself out. I mean, it always comes back to this, knowing yourself and understanding yourself is the best way to avoid being burnt out and also to take control of masking, which is really, the two are so closely connected.
Are there any more questions for us, Jules? And we'll start looking towards finishing up.
No more questions, but we have got a couple of ideas for Kieran's Island. Or Atlantis or Autopia.
That sounds a bit grand when it's only me living there.
But then if it's only you living there, you can call it what you like.
Exactly.
Yeah, we've had loads of people saying that they love your soapboxes, so don't worry about it, and they can totally relate to what we're saying. So don't worry about the waffling. It's all good.
Yeah, that's what I think. The waffles always go in a relevant direction. Yeah.
Just, I know we'll probably be finishing up soon, but before we get there, on my website, I have a specific page about masking and burnout. And about halfway down, we're at 3/4 of the way down, it's masking. But the last quarter or the last third is about burnout. So there's a few different videos, there's some articles and things, there's links to research and stuff like that. So if anybody's interested, there's just some further kind of resources to go and have a look through.
Lovely. I was reading one of your articles about burnout the other day, actually. It happened to come up completely coincidentally in another group. It was very interesting. It was quite hard reading. It was very interesting. So I'll find it again and share it on our page as well. So if anybody would like to read that, then they can do.
Also, to add, I've just finished a little course. I found an app, and it's from the Human Improvement Project, and it sounds really weird, but it's called In Love While Parenting. They've got another app as well, and I've just completed a little course on there, and they've got short bite-sized video things of how to really have a deep connection with your husband and your kids or your partner and your kids, and some of those videos are talking about even the best parents, when you talk about serve and return, when you're giving somebody a connection. Even the best parents only do it right, I think it said 30% of the time. So the guilt thing, to not beat yourself up when you're not able in that moment to give your child undivided attention straight away, and just as long as you can say, just to acknowledge them and just say, Mummy needs 5 minutes or something like that, that's enough, and that's doing it right. Even if you don't force yourself to try and be there 100% of the time, because it's not natural.
Nobody can do that, can they?
No. And I think the trouble is as well, if you are too perfect of a parent, this is what I tell myself, that if you're too perfect of a parent, then you set your kids up to fail, because then they become grown-ups and they go, well, what was going on there? Because my main adult role model just seemed to have everything together all of the time and was always sweetness and light. What I've got all these real emotions, what's going on?
Yeah, it's our kids know when we're being fake.
Yeah,
our kids really know when we're being fake, and putting on fronts like that. And I know people that are, every birthday has to be perfect and everything has to be perfect, and they don't just have birthday parties, they have these whole creations, and it's not real. It's so much more is needed, which is so much easier to give than it is to put all that time and effort and money into creating things which are just meaningless and fleeting. And yes, they might create nice memories, but they're not real memories, if you see what I mean. It's not reality, is it? It's not tangible. It's just a facade.
Yeah. I mean, I think we can see quite easily that you can't purchase a healthy childhood, given that kind of our ruling class all seem to be some of the most broken human beings, openly out there and walking around.
And in charge.
That's it.
Which is terrifying.
You only need to look at the Tory party to kind of go, oh, wait a minute, what does huge amounts of money and very little empathy create? People who think that letting people drown in the sea is better than giving them £40 a week after bombing their country. Now I'm going to get off my political soapbox because isn't the time for it. But yeah, that's it. It's being realistic, isn't it? Being realistic with your kids, being honest with your kids, and even with extremities. Even with I'm just too tired to get out of bed, but I will go on my hands and knees to go make you a sandwich. But then I'm going to go back to bed again. it's sometimes all we can do. It's the best that we can do.
It is. And I know, obviously, those of us that have children that are maybe more disabled than others in terms of kind of having physical disabilities and things, all of this is so much harder. And the guilt that you will carry will probably be so much greater as well, because you won't be able to give 100% all your time. And it's about recognizing that you can't be perfect and that you are giving as much as you can, and you cannot give any more than as much as you can. It's impossible. So there will come a time, maybe your children might not ever recognize this as they grow older. They might not have the cognitive ability to be able to recognize those things, but you are, and you need to kind of give yourself a little pat on the back and give yourself a little break for the effort and the life that you are creating for them, which is probably better than it would have been 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or maybe under other parents, or there has to be that kind of self-recognition that you're doing your best.
Lovely. Well, I think that is a lovely point for us to finish up on. So we shall leave it there for today. Thank you so much, Kieran. I love doing these with you, and I hope that our audience has enjoyed it as well. Jules, thank you for doing the live questions as well. I can cope with many things in life, but I just can't do those things all at once. Kieran, we can rope you into another one.
Of course.
We'll rope Kieran into another one. We'll try and do another one in a month or so. And we have also got a webinar coming up with Jodie Smitten at the end of September, which we're quite excited about. And we've got a book giveaway going on at the moment, which is Jodie's little girl's book, Secret Life of Rose, I think it's called. So for anybody watching, if you've enjoyed this, have a little look at what else we've got going on. And we'll see you back here soon. Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.